We are ready, I think. What's that? Lelzer underscore disappearing from the planet for an indefinite amount of time again? You must be insane! Hey, my name's Lelzer. You might recognize me from one of these two videos. You might not, but I apologize if you recognize me from anything before that. It's been a hot few minutes since I've done anything at all, but a little while ago I had realized I'd overlooked something important. Since about a few months after I made the Mekakucity Actors review, I've wanted to do a follow-up on it, since there was a lot I didn't talk about or even missed during my first time watching the show. I'd planned to do it in August, since the day August 15th is engraved in my brain as Kagero Day, but I decided to do the Ruby video that month instead. Fast forward a year and I realized, oh shit, I've missed August 15th again. I decided there's really no point in waiting a whole nother year just so I can have it line up neatly, so here we are, I want to talk about this again. It probably shouldn't come as much of a surprise to you if you're familiar with my channel that I'm pretty damn fond of the Kagero project. A video where I explicitly state that I really like it is, I think, my second most viewed video ever. That being said, I'm also the first to admit it's far from perfect. About the farthest it's ever gotten from perfect is Mekakucity Actors. The video I made on it admittedly wasn't my best, and I could have articulated my thoughts on it a lot better. For example, the scene-by-scene format I used in that video and totally didn't steal from Maul or didn't really work for Mekakucity Actors like it did Ruby, since it doesn't quite have as many hilariously terrible script decisions and its problems are mostly on a larger scale and affect most if not the entire show as opposed to isolated moments. But for those uninitiated, I guess I should give a little refresher on what I'm talking about. The Kagero project is the story of a bunch of kids trying not to get brutally murdered by an e-boy on steroids. It's told through 4 mediums, 5 if you're an asshole, corrects people based on technicalities, and really wants people to know that you know there are Kagero project radio dramas that like 4 people have ever listened to. This unfortunately led to a lot of fragmented and scatterbrained storytelling, especially because the difficulty in trying to take the introspective and self-contained nature of the songs and convert them into serialized works of fiction where there actually needs to be a story happening. That said, the novels did turn out alright. At least from what I've read so far. The anime, not so much. I guess it's only fair to start with the opening scene. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely reliant on the viewer having prior knowledge of the parts of the project that came chronologically before it, which is understandable given that it's the final timeline, but even then the scene doesn't really do anything. It's just a few cool shots mixed in with a fuckload of establishing shots and freeze frames of the main characters. Other than that, there were some little things that I caught that I didn't notice before, like there being a sudden gust of wind in an indoor department store, and jarring abundance of establishing shots, everybody being really stupid in episode 1 in particular. I could go on, but I think I'm being too nitpicking and biased. Moving on, the most prominent thing I noticed when I started rewatching the show is just how wrong a lot of it looks. Take the locations, for example. Shintaro's room in the manga and the songs is pretty much just a standard room with a computer in it, but in the anime, it's really fucking big and it has this huge screen along one of the walls, and his computer screens are transparent? For some reason, the Mekakucity-dan's apartment hideout, instead of just being a normal-ass apartment like it is in the manga, looks like a budget superhero hideout with like a table computer. More than that, this world just doesn't feel at all lived in. I've mentioned the gray people before, but what really adds insult to injury is that the important characters, the not gray people, are the only ones that do any significant amount of moving, and even then the animation is so stiff and slow it feels like everyone's wading through an invisible ocean of liquid concrete the entire show. I know it's kind of an unfair comparison considering this anime can't have been made on a higher budget than the first Black Sabbath album, but I would have absolutely loved to see this show have the visual attention to detail shows like Violet Evergarden have. Everything in this show feels insanely out of place all the time. The convenient appearance of random unnamed kidnappers and terrorists that never appear again, the strange absence of people in many places despite the show taking place in a big city, structures that have no reason to be where they are or look like they do. Maybe at times that's kind of the point, like in the Kagero Days episode. Let's talk about that episode for a minute, actually. Albeit poorly, it focuses on the events of the song. Well, 5 minutes of it do. The first 15 or so are spent on attempting to establish the characters of Hibiya and Hiroi. The problem? Hibiya and Hiroi along with the song they star in, are kind of completely useless in the grand scheme of things. Kagero Days, the song, does pretty much zero for the story, other than establish the existence of the days, the mechanics of which are still pretty unclear, by the way. It may have been explained somewhere, but I personally have no idea how Hibiya and Hiyori even got to the days in the first place, unless there's some weird timeline manipulation shit going on where part of episode 4 is happening chronologically between episodes 6 and 8. I'm getting ahead of myself. But about those last 5 minutes, it was when I rewatched this episode and I saw the bright blue backgrounds, the road signs and the power lines, the really slow, drawn-out dialogue, that I realized something. Oh. Lane. Now, very few of you probably understand what I just said, and that's completely fair. Anyone in the audience remember Serial Experiments Lane? I certainly didn't. I had no idea it even existed until a short while ago. It's essentially Ghost in the Shell plus Evangelion minus all the fun stuff. Interesting, but really fucking boring. And I would wager to say that Jin took major influence from Lane, especially the parts where the show wastes a lot of time. The biggest thing these two shows share is that they both have very little time to tell their story, Lane having 13 episodes and Mekakucity Actors having 12. And they both waste an unnecessarily large amount of time trying to make scenes with a lot of dialogue seem uncomfortable, and end up just being excruciatingly slow. The problem is made even worse by a little fact that I brought up in my original video. About half of Mekakucity Actors is setup, and about half of it is the actual story. This is very obviously a very big problem. So that's said and done, but I'd hate to leave this video with nothing but complaints. It's not hard to say the Mekakucity Actors is bad and just move on with life, but I think there's more to this show than that. Now, I'm not Breadbox. I'm not about to completely excuse something having clear flaws just because it makes people feel, and the argument that the Kagero Project was never about the plot is complete fucking nonsense. It stopped being true when the novels came out. That said, there still are a lot of things here that are deserving of praise. The concept is awesome, the soundtrack is fantastic, the characters are great, the art style is good, although it has its moments. There would be a lot more had the execution of most elements of this show not been god-awful, but it's been 7 years and I don't think we're getting a do-over. But let's say we were getting one. How could it be done better? Well, there's a lot here that could be done better. As it stands, half the show is the actual story, and more than half of that is exposition. The thing most absent and most needed here is time. For any TV anime that's actually trying to get a story across, 12 episodes is jack shit. It's nothing. We're talking about a story that has spanned 8 novels and 13 volumes respectively. For perspective, Fullmetal Alchemist wastes almost no time at all, and it's 27 volumes long, more than half the length of the Kagero manga, and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is 64 episodes long. What I'm trying to say here is that Mekakucity Actors desperately needs at least 24 episodes to even try to work. 32, preferably. It would also help if the exposition segments were cut down and they managed their time better. Keep in mind, the villain of the show is technically only introduced in episode 12. The last one. A lot of this also stems from trying to cram the entire plot of the show into a single day of in-universe time, since the whole actual story takes place on August 15th, and that ends up with the passage of time feeling all fucked up, and it seems like more things are happening in one day than could logically fit in one day. So I say, do what Fullmetal Alchemist did, and have the story largely leading up to the big day as opposed to all on the big day, so you have more in-universe time to establish these characters and get their relationships with each other working believably before you have to end the show. At the end of the day, while it does have its issues, there is a huge difference between the Kagero Project and something like later RWBY, for example. Both have big problems in their writing, production, and overall quality, really, but what makes the difference is the genuineness, if there's no better word for that. The 4th season of RWBY is a lackluster bastardization of what RWBY was in its early seasons, with zero fucks given about the characters being worked with or the story that had been established. Mekakucity Actors is not that. Its plot, Camp Green Lake with a side of Swiss cheese. Animation, so stiff at times it doesn't even look like human movement. Script, awkward and bordering on unnatural. But one thing it's not as soulless. The intent to create something good is there, and I can respect that. It's just, it's like when you're... That's my 2 cents anyway. Feel free to, did you know that only 25% of you are actually subscribed according to YouTube statistics? Shocker, I know. So hit the subscribe button. Yeah. I've been watching Family Guy. funny moments for the past 3 months.